Well, hello, gang. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
No complaints. Happy Monday. So, typically, when I've got guests on that haven't been on this channel, I'd love you guys to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here today. So, why don't we, ladies first? We'll start with you, Alexa.
All right. Okay, hi, my name's Alexa. I let's see, started my soil journey through cannabis. I've always been interested in like organic farming and I started growing cannabis in the industry with just, fertilizers and eventually got, while I was doing that, was learning about different, Korean natural farming and, composting and all these different methods. And really wanted to do it. Finally got the opportunity to try out living soil cannabis and with Haifa. That's a living soil grow in northern Michigan, where I helped build the beds and the recipe and built the system. And so that's where my living soil journey started. We opened and I knew microbiology was important, but I didn't, fully understand it. So one day I came across Dr. Elaine's course and her information. I was just like, whoa, like this is it. I need to dive into this. So I took the course and I just fell in love and found my passion through microbiology and composting. And so, right away I started applying those methods to the grow. And, we were having issues. And, after the first compost tea application, like pest, disease, anything that we were dealing with was like gone. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this stuff is amazing. So I just dove into making compost teas, making compost, improving the, microbiology in through those applications. And, now just, diving deeper into that. And, I just want to give you, Leighton, so much praise. And because you are always bringing the latest information, to the public. And it has helped me tremendously on my journey. Listening to this show every week and all the amazing guests you have on has been just like incredible. And, so thank you for all the work that you do to bring this information to light, because the world of soil is really just and microbiology is changing just so incredibly fast, and it's so hard to keep up with. And you're like the number one person who's like always bringing that new stuff to the table. And so I really appreciate that. And and of course Camp Compost. I met Chandler and our other co-host Mike, who couldn't be here today, but at an event, and the stars aligned, and we started Camp Compost, and it's our 4th year. We had our 4th year this year. We'll be going on our 5th year next year, and it's been just an incredible thing to be a part of. And so we can talk more about that as well. But that's my journey. That's my background. I'll hand it over to Chandler.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, I got started also growing cannabis throughout college. Got more and more into living soil. Just what I was seeing on Instagram, seeing that there are ways to grow in like a living ecosystem inside, because I started off growing in these small pots, and I went to the grocery store and they gave me a couple bottles of fertilizer, and I don't know, I felt more like a chemist mixing up stuff than like a biologist, or like somebody just like feeding the soil and getting good plants. And so got into the world of living soil and compost, and doing a super soil say, okay, compost is like the biggest difference. You know, you can have all the same inputs, but whatever compost you put in it is going to make the biggest difference. And so learned about earthworm castings, and that got me into the world of composting my own food scraps at home with worms, just in like a little worm tower, and really just catapulted me into, you know, a better lifestyle of eating better food so I could feed my worms, you know, better stuff, so I can get better compost, so I can grow better ganja, and then eventually grow all sorts of other medicines, all sorts of other plants. Um, and it led me to Wormies, which is a company that I work for now. I'm the manager out at the farm, and um, yeah, it's totally changed my life working with compost every single day. And uh, yeah, so like Alexa said, we met, and I was already doing the compost thing, and we wanted to have a compost specific gathering. Um, you know, we went to a bunch of different cannabis festivals, and it's always pretty much the same thing. But having a festival specifically focused on living soil and how do we regenerate soil, how do we grow all sorts of stuff, not just cannabis, but celebrate cannabis, but also just celebrate soil and growing all sorts of things, and giving respect to the soil, because without it, it wouldn't exist. So. Um, yeah, super blessed to be here. Super blessed to be part of Camp Compost and Wormies. And you can find my personal account at Jet House Gardens. And so thanks for having us here.
Oh, absolutely. I've been bugging you guys for a while now. I felt almost like I'm getting too pushy on you guys, but
Happy to be here. Just super busy, you know how it is.
and I really love what you guys did. We did a compost cup out here, and I know we talked about that, you know, in the beginning, and we chopped up like, well, how do you really judge it? And it was a challenge for me because we had a lot of participants, and I microscoped as many samples as I thought were suitable, like the really stinky ones. I just didn't even bother. We disqualified them. But then when we had the judge, we had 10 judges here. There was only one judge that actually smelled it. Everybody else gave it an award based on its feeling. And so that kind of defeats the purpose of like understanding that compost should be biological. I mean, it can be just chemistry. That's fine. It's still a product. It's just, it's not, the potential is so much greater when you get a living compost than a, what we call a, you know, just churn and burn compost. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's why I was, you know, so excited about, you know, you guys pulling together a group, like group learning, and like you said, celebrating, you know, compost making and how to, you know, as a group come up with better recipes and concepts. And so, you know, again, a learning event, but also a celebratory event. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit what happened this year in your 4th year?
We brought in a keynote speaker this year, Kotemak Via, which I'm not sure. Have you had any interviews with him?
I know I haven't. Who is he?
Yeah, Bokashi for you on Instagram.
Okay.
Been looking up to him, learning from him for years, and finally we were able to bring him out, and he taught a demo on biochar and then quantum biochar, and brought in all sorts of different elements to it, and it was just absolutely incredible. And Alexa, you got anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the theme this year was like quantum like energy. Like we didn't plan it that way. It just ended up being like a lot of our speakers were like diving into like this quantum field where they're talking about how energy is like impacting the soil and like our health as well. So that was like really interesting. Yeah, Quadamox demonstration was absolutely incredible. The quantum graviton charcoal, I believe he was calling it. So he was setting up these like barriers with this what he was calling the quantum graviton charcoal, and basically he was saying that they're starting to use these and test these because they can like
Increase the conductivity of your soil.
yeah, increase the conductivity, but also like bind up toxicity like PFAS and you know, really heavy stuff like that. So that's something really interesting as well, that it like, kind of like taking activated charcoal for your body. It kind of like binds it and holds on to it, rather than like the bioremediation where you're breaking it down into possibly more uh, dangerous things, but that was really interesting. And then we also had Tim, who was talking about circadian health, or quantum biology. So that was really cool to learn how our light environment is actually impacting uh, our physical, biology as well. The one thing I saw, a study that actually showed that our light environment had more impact on the diversity of our microbiome than the food that these people were eating in the study, which was mind blowing. So he was kind of teaching how, like, to improve our light environment and optimize it through diet and just different practices. And yeah, so that was another really impactful one. But all of our speakers are, always so incredible. We just, love being able to feature so many amazing people in our community, and, bring so many people together, because, it's all about connecting with Mother Nature, and everyone has their little niche, like the microbes, have their little niche in their environment. And everyone connects with Mother Nature in a different way. So for everyone to come together and share their unique way of how, they're connecting back with nature is just great, so that, everyone can take their piece and take that home and, implement that in their own lives and with their own community, and, share that, with each other, and create ripples, because that's what it's all about, just with the way that the world is going. We need to come together and, share these practices, share this traditional knowledge, with each other. And that's really what Camp Compost, is all about. And, just our connection with nature, and understanding that we are a part of nature, and not separate from nature. So like anything that we do, to nature affects us and affects our communities eventually. So if we can do something to improve the environment, it's also, improving us as well. If you think about like the James Lovelock Gaia principle, or Gaia theory, where it's like, Gaia Earth is like all one organism, and anything will, affect every level of life. So yeah.
Sorry about Cheeto. He gets a little excited from time to time.
Do you have a dog? You have a new dog, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, Poe got really depressed last winter. He wasn't eating. He didn't want to walk. He didn't want to play anymore. I brought him to the vet. We, did all the blood work, and they wanted to put him on freaking Prilosec. I'm like, no, I'm not going to put my dog on freaking antidepressants. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? So I talked to Poe's trainer, and she's like, well, you got to either, get a cat or a dog, or I said, can I get a cat? She's like, well, cats are 50% nocturnal. So if you get a nocturnal one, it's not going to work, because that cat will be up all night and the fellow will be sleeping. So she convinced me what made the most sense was to get a dog. So we went down to introduce Poe to puppies so that I could see if he was like not going to kill it, right?
Right.
And I get all jealous. And so we got this little rescue out of East LA. And I swear to God, he's a crip. He's a little gangster all the way. I'm sure he'll come up and I'll introduce you to him. But yeah, so it worked. The two of them get along great. They're playing all the time now. Poe's back to walking and eating. And so, yeah, it worked. Thank God. But anyway, so Chandler, how many people showed up this year?
About 150.
Nice.
Yep.
How many did you have last year?
Around the same.
Okay.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
a good turnout.
For sure. I think there was maybe a little bit less this year. We moved it up in the season. This was the first time that it was in August instead of September. And then there was a little bit of rain, but everybody that came toughed it out, and I think it made it more fun. There's like a bubble around us, and like there's storm clouds on either side, and like we were protected pretty much the whole entire time. But then it did pour on Saturday night, and it just brought everybody together underneath the hoop house, and I think it made it even more intimate. And so it all worked out, and everybody had a great time.
Yeah.
It's usually right. Things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me a little bit more about how he's charging his biochar. Is he like running electricity through it, or is that like IP?
Basalt, so some paramagnetic rock dust, and the EM and molasses, so expanded EM, molasses, basalt, and then salt water, or sea salt. And
Nice.
yep.
And what is that? The bioceramics.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Powder.
Yep, the Super Sarah bioceramic powder.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Very cool. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So he's cooking it and then charging it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then putting it into this barrier. So he's like burying it every few feet, and then putting a copper rod on where he buries it.
I like
stuff.
Yeah.
There's a hole dug every 10 feet and filled up with this charcoal, probably like a 5-gallon bucket worth of the graviton charcoal, he's calling it, or they're calling it. He's getting this straight from Emro, Japan. And so Emro does the conference every year on EM Mudball Day, I think, October or August 8th or something like that. And they have a conference, and it's all in Japanese, but you can like read the subtitles and stuff, and that's what he's been doing, and like learning so much like straight from the source. And they're so far ahead of all of this stuff. But Cornell is getting involved, and like there are some universities and people studying it in the US, and just like really learning a lot of really cool stuff about it. But so they got these holes every 10 feet with the copper rod coming down, a stick. You can use a bamboo pole or a stick, but it's the electroculture principle, and you're just bringing electrons down into this pit full of the charcoal. I don't know. We'll post videos that he did it. I don't want to do it injustice because I'm still wrapping my head around it. But there's these holes every 10 feet, and then every 3 feet in between the poles, there's EM mud balls that are buried. And then he pours the solution of the salt water and the basalt, and I think you could use like a couple different mineral options, but we had basalt available, and the EM and the Super Sarah powder, and he pours this line in between the poles with the copper coming down, and it creates these EM rectified barriers, they call them, and it's just next level, straight up. So we'll be posting more on it. I think he's working on it on his website, Ground Culture PDX. Yep.
Damn, I got to get that man on here.
You really do, man. Like for real. I'm not doing it justice talking about it, but you really.
I agree, 100%.
All right. Well, you guys definitely want to send me his contact information. I'll reach out and connect him again. We'll get him on. So I've been reading some really interesting things that I kind of knew, but I didn't totally understand. And that is that our pets, dogs and cats specifically, although turtles and some other pets can do it as well, but they are what's called electron donors. So they go out and they collect electrons when they're walking on the soil, laying in the sun, and then they come back and they sit on your lap or snuggle with you at night, and they're releasing all of those electrons back to us. And that's why we have such a great relationship with.
So good to cuddle,
right?
You're grounding, like
it's the same thing. It's like grounding, but if you don't have time, they do it for you.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So and another thing too is tree hugging. This is something that Pauline taught me, like, when we first met. She had a tree that she always went out and hugged every day. It's the same thing. It's like electroculture. That tree is loaded with all kinds of energy, and when you're hugging it, that tree's giving it to you. So it's the same idea, grounding, but the opposite. So it's like now you're, as below as above, right? So now you're gaining electricity or energy from the atmosphere by using a living sentient being. So
they're all just antennas capturing those cosmic rays, bringing it down, man.
It's so fucking cool. And then another thing that I've been doing for years, and I've been talking a lot about lately, and that is sun gazing. So sun gazing is when you stare at the sun, either when it's first coming up or when it's going down. Please don't do it at the height of the day; it will hurt your eyes. But when it gets low in the atmosphere like that, when you stare at it, you can actually see a blue circle inside the white light, and it talks to you. I swear to God, it's like pulsing and moving and wiggling. You guys got to try it, man. You were talking about quantum energy and that we need to get more light into our cells. Well, yeah, you can do that through sun tanning. But when you sun gaze, man, you're directly affecting your pineal gland. That's where all that energy is going, is right into the center of your connection with the whole, the all.
Yep. Your pineal and your pituitary are both directly affected by that sunlight. And yeah, Tim talked about that and how you're literally getting today's download when you go out and do that. And all the food, when you harvest it, it's been hit by that sunlight, and it's, got that code from the sun stored inside of the fruit, inside of that structured water that's inside of that, perfectly shaped fruit that's, filtered by the skin of it, and like all the stuff that like we can't even like comprehend, but it's magic, and it's what makes that fruit incredible. And so like when we eat tomatoes fresh off the vine, there's nothing like it. When we eat food fresh off the vine, there's nothing like it, because it's not just the nutrients, it's the biology, it's the structured water, it's the energy. You're getting the life force from that plant, and water in it has been filtered through every cell inside of that plant, and like it's some pretty cool stuff. And so growing as much food that you can and getting local food, it's not just supporting a local economy. It's not just about not having to ship stuff in. It's like that's what you need to thrive in your local climate, in your local ecosystem. You need to be eating local food with local microbes that have been imprinted by the sun and like the code that you need. And like there's a lot to it.
Alexa, you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, that's what Tim's talk was about this year, is like the importance of eating local food, not like Chandler just said, just because it supports local community, but also because like the light information within that food is the like cohesive with the light information that we're experiencing, like our bodies, like that our eyes and our cells, our skin is like seeing. So like when we're eating like a mango in the middle of winter, there's like a mismatch with the light information. So it confuses the body, and the body's like, whoa, like what is it? It has a harder time processing what's going on. So there's like a disconnection because of that with the food that we're eating. So, he was just saying like, in the wintertime and just eat seasonally and locally. So that was really, really cool and interesting to hear. And he would be another person that, if you want to get on here, that would be really knowledgeable about that.
All the contacts from Camp Compost.
No, seriously, it'd be cool.
Yeah,
definitely. We're always looking for people. I mean, I'm blessed that I have the resources that I do, but after podcasting for, I think I'm on my 7th year now, I've torn through a lot of the people that I know. So I could definitely use some fresh people, especially younger ones with these new understandings and expanded minds. I mean, let's face it, your generation is really stepping up to the game, whereas my generation, unfortunately, I'm the tail end of the baby boomers. They were just extractionists, man. They just extracted everything to gain wealth. And it's like, no, we can't do that anymore. We have to give back. We have to have conversations like that about, hey, you don't want to eat a mango in winter. It's not going to jive with your body, and you're introducing microbes from another part of the world that could potentially be pathogens, in the bigger picture. And
Right.
you guys, I've always loved you guys because I'm like, yeah, I'm not working if my fingernails aren't dirty. And you guys are the same. It's like we have these microcosms that is constantly infecting, or not infecting, but increasing our microbial well-being because of our, exposure to compost and plants and soil.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I'd definitely be really excited to get some new guests from your generation. Again, I've exhausted mine from my generation. So, all right, let's bounce. I want to talk about hyphae and I want to talk about wormies. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Chandler.
All right, what you got for me?
So when I was there, and it must have been 4 years ago, right? Or was it 5 now?
Forget if it was before or after all of that.
So I kind of want to say it was right before Camp Compost, the first year, but it might have been the year before that. But I was you were just getting going there. You had one windrow of worms, and I know that there's been a huge difference over the last 5 years. So
Oh yeah, man.
talk to me.
Just last December, we got full approval. We've been battling up the township for, they've never had a compost operation in their township, and they're a pretty strict township. There's a lot of high property values around, and people thought that we were going to start like a landfill, basically. So there's like a lot of backlash against it. They're just absolutely ignorant to what we were doing. So we explained, we're not a huge industrial compost facility, and we're not taking in all of this bioplastics, and like we have very vetted stuff. Like we bring it and we mix it with wood chips and leaves, and that's it. It's and all the food scraps come from people that want to compost, and they know exactly what they can and cannot put in their bin. So we explained everything. We educated the township, who was all against us when we started, and got them eventually all for us, and really did a lot of education and teaching people about the importance of soil and how to regenerate it with compost. And we can't just keep on putting everything in the landfill. We're really running out of landfill space, especially here in GR, but I know it's everywhere. We've got 6 years projected left to put stuff in our landfill here. So it's these are big problems, and regenerating soil and like just making the conscious effort of not putting organic matter in your trash can and sending it to the landfill, but instead returning it to the soil is so important. And so that's what we've been doing, and we have about 900 members that we pick up food scraps from, including different businesses and cafes and juice bars and restaurants. Yeah, kind of all over the place. But we put up a hoop house in December once we got approval, and we built a compost bay, a concrete bay that we flip all the compost on with our skid steer, and a storage container and electricity and water, and just like everything since December. And so this year's been so much fun using this new site that we built from scratch. And so I feel like we've been waiting in limbo for the past couple years, and now we're finally going forth with everything, and having a lot of fun composting and growing all sorts of stuff. Planted 100 trees before we had any water in the past couple of years, and so a couple of them died without water in them, but now we're at about 80 trees, and just like spreading out all these berries everywhere, and just growing an oasis of life there, and just couldn't be happier doing that. So super blessed to be working with Wormies and to be creating really good compost and growing really nutrient dense food.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, are you growing fruit trees or just more screens? Like
Both fruit and nuts, and shade trees, trees around the compost to help shade them, and give us more leaves in the fall time. And it's incredible. It started with like 3 different raspberry varieties and just like 3 canes of each, and now I've got like 100 canes that I'm transplanting this week and putting into long rows, and like we'll have enough for like you pick by next year. And like is just like really coming along fast, you know. So definitely want to have more events there as we're developing the farm and have you back out there, show you what's going. And we're in Grow Zone 6 here in Grand Rapids. That question there. But in our hoop house, there's 2 layers of plastic and a fan blowing air in between the two. And so that should, in theory, bring us up to like Grow Zone 8. And so we can, you know, grow a couple different varieties in there that we wouldn't be able to without it. So yeah, super stoked.
Yeah, I love that system. I mean, it's by far the best. There was a company that I was working with down in Texas that basically were building these for the oil sands up in Canada, where you know they have an average weather of like I think it's 15 degrees. You know, the course of the year averaged out, and so that's very difficult to work. What's the matter, Poe? But they did an amazing job. They took it to a whole new level as far as like heating the air too, so that even if it's like negative 40 or 50 out, it's still perfectly comfortable inside the building. So that's fantastic. I mean, you'll probably get two crops in a year because of that.
Yep.
Maybe 3.
Right, and that's what we're looking into next is how do we heat that thing using some compost, using a huge pile of wood chips and some piping.
Mm-hmm.
How do we circulate the water? So there's just endless projects to be working on there to keep it going and keep on growing.
There you go. And dude, if you could be growing and or producing compost year round, I mean,
yeah,
that's huge. I mean, you probably could bring in some worm bins, you know, or set up worm bins for the winter.
Yeah, that's the goal for sure. The whole south side of the hoop house is all worm breeding and a little bit of storage, and then the north side's filling up with rows. And we grew a ton of tomatoes and peppers and eggplant and fennel and all sorts of stuff this year, just building up the soil because where we put the hoop house, actually we had to like move like a portion of the hillside, and so in like the very middle of the hoop house, we're like 4 feet down in like the subsoil, and it's all super hard clay, and like so that stuff is compacted, you know, it's like a cement floor under there basically. So we're getting the roots in there, and we added a bunch of compost, a bunch of leaf mold and biochar, and like just really working on getting that soil going. And yeah, we had pretty good success this year growing some plants, but there's definitely some stuff that did not thrive. And it's like, yeah, it's got a couple inches of soil before it hits that
The hard
pan clay. Yeah. So
hey,
it's
little by little.
better every year, you know, and the fact that we already got, you know, abundance from it this year is very, you know, optimistic. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, that is really encouraging. And yeah, even if you only got a couple inches, think about it. In 4 years, you're going to have feet.
Yep.
Topsoil underneath your
Yep.
plants. So that's fantastic. I'm going to come back to you and talk more about your feedstocks. So, but let's bounce to Alexis. So, Alexis, tell us, talk to me. What's going on?
Gosh. So yeah, I mean, it, you know, took years to figure out the system, but it's running really smoothly now and finally have everything dialed in, and it's, you know, it's really great that, you know, making a soil indoors, you know, manufacturing it and putting it all together, trying to mimic the outdoor as best as possible is not as easy as it sounds. And yeah, it was difficult, but yeah, now things are finally at a place where it's, you know, everything's growing good. It's really consistent, and the soil is really nice. You know, pretty low maintenance at this point. Yeah, and I guess I attribute a lot of that to compost teas, which I love, and compost extracts. And from you, Leighton, I've learned that, you know, probably the reason why compost teas and extracts work so well is because of the dissolved organic matter that's in there. And that, you know, the study you sent me about that was incredible. It blew my mind. So yeah, it's cool to like now know, you know, why that works so well. As you know, because I've seen I started when I saw how compost teas like improved the soil so much, I was like, okay, how do I brew the most diverse compost tea? Because, it's got to be about like the diversity in there. And I think to some extent it definitely is about having, brewing a compost tea that has really good microbial diversity and activity, and or making a compost extract with the same, diversity and activity. But now there's like this added level of, okay, wow, we have this dissolved organic matter in there, and that's, forming the mineral associated organic matter, and the microbial necromass, which is also forming the mineral associated organic matter, and that's, forming this carbon and this like long-term storage of nutrients and like this slow release, and building the soil and building the carbon in there, creating the structure, like the foundation for the soil health to just be in balance and harmony. It's like that's kind of how I see it. So yeah, that's really cool. So I guess another thing that I've been into lately is epifluorescence and looking at mycorrhizal associations under the microscope and starting to measure that in, just seeing how plants, that have those in certain ecosystems and things like that. So that's what I'm starting to really get into and really wanting to learn about, because I think mycorrhizal, we know it's so important, but I think it's something that's not really like measured or looked at as much as just like, the morphology of the microorganisms, and measuring the different functional groups and getting that data. And now, adding the data of, okay, this plant is this much colonized in the root with mycorrhizae, or things like that. So I think, mycorrhizae are so important for, nutrient acquisition of the plant, and in just so many different things. And I'm really excited to, start looking at that, and being able to measure that as well. So I do have a website now. It's organicalexa.com, and I I am starting to do some consulting work. So if doing the biological analysis, I can now do mycorrhizal data as well. I can do soil testing, so I can look at a soil chemistry test, and give recommendations on adding different minerals and things, because that's another thing that I learned from you, Leighton, is it's not, you have the biology, but you also need to look at the chemistry and the physical like texture and structure of the soil. So, all those three things together, that's like the trinity of soil health. It's like the biology, the physics, and the chemistry. You have to look at it holistically for it to all kind of work together. You can't just like focus in on one of those and, expect for the system to work. It all works together. So that's another thing I learned from you, is having like the soil horizons. And we did bring in sand and clay and silt into the beds at a certain point, and that actually was really helpful, because the number one thing that we noticed when we did that is we had those gray isopods just like overwhelming, like to the point where they're eating the plants and stuff. Those issues with the gray isopods, once we added like the sand and the clay, went away. So not completely like went away, but they got a lot better, like a lot better.
Yeah.
So that's that we added that to, we noticed like a very, significant decrease in those populations, and it kind of like balanced out. And I was like, huh, that's so interesting. Just changing like that physical structure of the soil is so important. And I think, another part of the physical structure of the soil is like the roots also. And that's another thing I learned from that study that you sent me is the root exudates are also that like dissolved organic matter that contribute to the formation of mineral associated organic matter. So that's something that, we've always, found is that having a solid cover crop and growing diverse species of plants with the cannabis has always shown to be very much more beneficial than we actually have had times where we were like got rid of the cover crop completely, whether it was just like pests or certain things we were having problems with, got rid of the cover crop completely and it made more problems. So what we found is, just find those cover crops that like work in your system. It's going to be different for everyone, whatever works in your system, just find them. But having, diverse plant roots are going to call in these different microbiology as well. So that's going to really contribute to the diversity in your soil is having different plant species. That's what I've found to be number one when building soils or improving the microbiology in the soils is like having the diverse plant species rather than I find a lot of times if I add a compost tea, if it has good diversities, it's not necessarily going to translate into the soil, but having like diverse plants there, it will translate into diverse microbiology. So that's something I've noticed. But no matter what, if you're adding any type of microbiology to the soil, it's gonna be beneficial because the soil organic matter is 50% microbial necromass, so the dead bodies of microorganisms. And so any microbes that you can add to the soil are going to be beneficial because then the dead bodies can form that mineral associated organic matter, which is so beneficial for that, again, that long-term storage of nutrition. So, okay, I'll stop there.
Damn, damn, girl, that was a great rant. So, been paying attention to the latest on mycorrhizae, and some of the cool facts that are coming out is that mycorrhizae is acting a lot like plants, and it's actually letting bacteria dissolve its outer shell and go internally into the mycorrhizae, where it's then shot between plants.
Yeah.
And so what you're talking about, Alexa, by doing diverse plants, you're by default encouraging all kinds of horizontal gene transfer, some of these other integral, what do we call them? Evolutionary traits that are occurring at a mind-boggling speed in soils and compost and all these other things. So, that's fantastic. And then also, they've clearly shown that there's an aqueous coating around the mycorrhizae, just like a root, and that too is transferring organisms back and forth between the plants. So if you start to think about it, mycorrhizae is just another fucking root. It's just a root that's attaching to a plant instead of being grown by the plant.
Right, and attaching to all the plants in that area and creating a system that's a one living system that's all of those mycorrhizae and all those plants, and like you can't just look at one plant like it's one plant anymore. It's connected to everything, and like just crazy, man. It's so beautiful. Like,
yeah, it's deep shit, and I love it because it really,
we're part of it. We're just one strand on this incredible web. And for us to think that we can like step out and understand the whole entire web of life, I don't think we're ever gonna be able to do that. But like. Well, learning about it and how we can use this knowledge to help, create better ecosystems and to help, grow better gardens. Back for a long, long time.
Yeah, no, I think we're doing that. Conversations like this, and those that occurred at Camp Compost, are exactly how we can make a difference and how we
Mhm.
can change the course. And I think that the next level is we need to be more tightly bound with the native community because
Mhm.
they knew all this and we heard them talking, thought they were crazy. We thought they were nuts talking about the four directions and the energy and we
Right.
come back as a spirit and we sometimes we turn into an eagle, sometimes we turn into a buffalo. But all that's true because if the buffalo, you buried me in the soil and the buffalo ate the grass that came off of my decomposing body, I am part of the buffalo then,
Yeah.
right? Because energy can't be created nor destroyed. So it all just keeps recycling and recycling and recycling. And that's kind of what we're all about at this point is we need to recycle our food waste, recycle our green waste, turn them into something usable and not just oxidize the fuck out of our soils.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, the oxidization versus reduction, and why that's part of having the cover crops, especially like buckwheat. And I mean, just like any roots in there, you're having a reducing effect on your soil instead of oxidizing it. And I think that is so important. And if you want to talk on that, I'm
Oh,
still getting my head around all of that, but then you got it down.
yeah. So, I mean, in nature, the only time you have bare soil is usually after a disturbance,
Hmm.
disturbance event, hurricane, tornado, volcano, earthquake, or it's a desert, right? But again, that's the desert is got to be one of the most incredibly diverse systems ever. I mean, if you guys have ever been in Arizona and like been in monsoon season, where you drive through the desert one day and there's very little life, just a cactus, but there's a monsoon happens, you drive through it the next day, everything is blooming, everything is blossoming.
Hmm.
So how does that happen, right? That goes back to that necromass and plants that learned how to hibernate. Another thing that's really interesting is what's called biocrust. So just as of the last, I don't know, 2 years, there was a group that studied for 5 years in understanding biocrust and then trying to figure out how to duplicate it. They crashed and burned pretty much every time because what they didn't realize was just how sensitive that biocrust is. So they finally figured out a way to add some kind of emulsifier so that the bacteria could begin to build the biofilms that actually hold it together. So everything that they did, even though they played it out, they grew out all of the appropriate species that do it. But as soon as they introduced them to the native soil, it didn't work because it didn't have. It takes years and years and years for that to build up, and that's what they didn't understand. Is like
Yeah.
man can't just come in here and spray shit on the sand and expect it to take. It doesn't work that way. It could take thousands of years. We really don't know. But and this goes back to why they're putting a lot more conservation on some of these beautiful deserts because yeah, we love to drive our motorcycles and our dune buggies through the deserts, and I mean that's all fun and great, but the damage that we're doing is going to potentially take who knows how long for those crusts to come back, and they're not thick. They're only like, I think they were talking a quarter of an inch, as most. So even at foot traffic, even hiking
Yeah.
will decimate them to some degree. Now if you step on them and you flatten them, well, they're still going to be there. They're just disturbed.
Mhm.
It's not like you tore through it with a motorcycle and just sprayed it
Right,
everywhere.
everywhere.
So foot traffic is a lot less damaging than using vehicles, motorized vehicles. But so that and the most recent information on air biomes. So they've studied, I think it's up to 10,000 feet above the surface of the Earth, and they're realizing that there's a whole other biome up there. And this wonderful scientist, I forget her last name. She's a friend of Craig's. Did a paper back 4, 5, maybe 6 years ago now. She studied wildfires, and she came up with a whole new level of biology that's being transferred in smoke and ash.
Yeah, you need to talk with Quatamok, man. He talks about the microbes in the smoke. Yeah.
Yeah, so between that and the desert storms in the Sahara that are fertilizing the Amazon, there's this whole constantly regenerating system that's way beyond, a little, oh, I'm going to just do this here.
Yeah.
It's crazy how complex it is. And
I love that. It really gets people thinking, like what are the clouds? Those are like the mushroom spores, and that's the dust, and that's the pollen. It goes all the way up there, and all these little spiders that can float up there, and like, there's so much going on, and that water vapor needs something to condensate onto, and it's all those little particles. And so like clouds are all of these things that go up there, all the pollen, all the spores, like
they're alive.
it comes back down. Yeah, it's absolutely alive.
They're
The
alive.
whole system is alive.
And but this is the stuff the natives would talk about, the indigenous would talk about, and we'd be like, "You're fucking crazy, dude. Go back to your hut, right? You don't know what you're talking about." Turns out they were way right compared to what we believed in our infinite freaking wisdom.
Absolutely.
Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to rant.
No, you're good. That's very important, and yeah, having First People's presence in these conversations is important. They can teach us so much, and that's been part of Camp Compost. Absolutely, we did a water blessing at the spring this year, and
Nice.
that's what it's all about. Is how can we heal people's relationship with our Earth Mother? It's like we absolutely rely on Mother Earth for everything. It's how often do we take that for granted? It's like we can't walk outside without stepping on Earth, So it's like it gives us that ground to walk on. It gives us the food to eat, the water that we need, fresh air. Everything comes from this system, and the fact that like we can grow such amazingly tasty food and like get the minerals that we need to survive is like amazing. Without the minerals in the soil that have been brought to us, from the microbe nation, and the four winds, the weathering and all the erosion that happens, and the microbes that eat these rocks, give us the soil. It's eons that it's taken for the soil to be what it is. So now there's minerals in the soil that can be taken up by these microbes and traded, with the sugars that the plants are making through this dance of photosynthesis. And like, it's beautiful. And our food comes from somewhere beautiful, and our soil is sacred, and these rocks are sacred. Have you seen the study on the rocks that are creating oxygen in the ocean? Yeah. Like rocks are minerals, rocks are the parent material, and so that's what the soil scientists call it. That's the parent material. Well, the natives call it the grandparents. Rocks are grandparents. Wakan. That's the first energy that used to be magma. It used to be all liquid everything, and it gave its power, it gave its mobility, and it turned rigid. And that's the ground that we walk on today. And just everything's sacred. And I can ramble about this forever, but to learn from Native peoples and some of our ancestors from all over the world, it's not just here in America. There's been people that have been connected with the land all over, and it's just in the past couple hundred years, that it's been taken away from us, and we don't even think of ourselves as part of nature anymore. We see ourselves as separate from nature, and that's not true. It's like indigenous people don't even have a word for nature in a lot of cultures, because nature is everything. Like, what are you talking about, nature? And so now, like, when we try to think, okay, like, we're humans, we live in the city, and this is a nature preserve, and we don't touch it at all, like, that's nature over there, nobody touch it. I don't think that's even, the way it should be. It's like we should be co-creating with nature, and like it's shown that, cultivating these plants and helping thin out some of these plants will help that plant, thrive, and so like human intervention with these plants helps the plants thrive, helps the people thrive. It's not like we need to stay separate from nature and like, this is our city, that's, that's nature over there. It's like we need to be co-collaborating with these microbes, with these plants, with everything.
So very true. Alexa, please add to that. I could just see you smiling away over there.
Whoa, Chandler just speaks so beautifully about that. I wish I could, honestly. He's really has a way with words when it comes to, talking about our connection. I yeah, I just agree completely, like I was kind of explaining before, like, you know, we Earth is like one organism, you know, and we all have a part to play, and you know, humans have kind of been disconnected from like that purpose. And you know, we have these amazing brains and capacity for knowledge, and you know, we can use that to, be destructive, or we can use it to be like regenerative. And yeah, I just think that's kind of our purpose, is to be stewards of the land and to take care of our home essentially. And um you know, when we are connected with mother nature, you know, it really brings you back to like who you are, and like changes you. That, you know, that was definitely my experience, you know, because I, you know, have not always been connected to the earth. I, you know, grew up very disconnected, and I had to, you know, find that connection again. And, you know, I think we as a society like crave this connection. We almost like don't know that we're missing it, you know, until you find it. But we try to like fulfill it with all these other things, like with, you know, buying consumerism, or with, you know, in my case, like drugs and alcohol. And we try to get connection through these other things, and because we're missing it so much in our lives and the way that we live. So for me and my journey, you know, through addiction, it was like coming back to nature is what, you know, really helped me along, and you know, made me like realize that I'm like a part of something. I have a purpose here. And you know, just the soil was in composting was a huge part of that. So what I always like to talk about is compost from a philosophical, I guess, perspective, because you know, what is compost? It's like this you know, waste that is transformed through the alchemy of the microorganisms and turned into fertile ground for new life to emerge. It's death and rebirth all in one, right? So if we use compost as a metaphor, it's you know, taking old worn out paradigms in our lives and transforming it into something that we can use for our future, and for the betterment of ourselves. So like for me with addiction, it was, you know, taking those experiences that I had, taking that time in my life, and putting it through, giving it to the microbes, putting it in the compost pile, and transforming it into, you know, how can I better first myself, because that's important. And then once you better yourself, you can help other people as well, or, you know, and it sends out a ripple. So when you're, you know, constantly trying to be a better person, that sends out a ripple. And you know, you don't even have to necessarily try to help people, just like that in itself, just the energy of doing that, you know, helps the collective consciousness, whether we, you know, really try or not. So yeah, so I always kind of think of the microorganisms as the angels, because you know, they're this uh, you know, unseen organism that is able to, you know, transform. It's like the seers, or the organisms that can, you know, facilitate the death and rebirth process. And they're always, you know, working for the betterment of the earth, and you know, for life. Even the pathogens, you know, they have a purpose. They're doing something. They're trying to better that environment, even though it may seem, you know, destructive or pathogenic. It's actually, you know, everything, their intentions are to improve that environment. And yeah, so that's all I have for that
And that
rant.
was perfect timing, Alexa. We need to go into the contest. So you're just finishing up. Guys, put in hashtag compost. We're giving away Leighton's course again. It's an online course, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can access it. Last week's winner, they still haven't emailed me. You guys got to email me if you win at it'sallaboutthebiology.com. So I'm going to let you guys go on for about 5 minutes. Anybody that wants to enter, please put in hashtag compost.
Hey, Ken,
And,
you want to hear something crazy?
What's that?
I'm working with a gentleman, a client, who that's his nephew that won.
Oh, cool.
How weird is that, right? How friggin' weird is that? So I'll make sure I tell him that, hey, get your cousin or whoever he is, kick him in the ass.
Exactly. Kick him in the butt. Get him to send me that email. Okay, so in 5 minutes, guys, we're going to run the contest. So I'll let you guys get back at it.
Okay. Well, I wanted to just make a comment, Alexa. I think that in so many ways, what you just said is incredibly inspiring for people who are struggling.
Yeah.
There's so much depression out there. There's so much anger and fear and anxiety about what's going on around us. And bottom line is, you're absolutely correct. If you just go become one with nature, whether it's sitting on a beach staring at the ocean, just put this fucking thing away from it and connect, be present. And all that stuff just seems to wash away. We're so focused on, oh, well, I've got to be successful. What the fuck is successful?
Yeah.
Right? Successful is when you get up every day and you're excited for the day and you're doing what you love and you're doing it every day. Not like, oh, I'm drudging through work. Oh, I got to work tomorrow. No, well, if you're doing your purpose, if you found your niche, it's not work. It's what you do. It's who you are. And that's so true with like the lost souls, is they just never took the time to try to figure out who they are, what makes you happy, what motivates you. And that's where they need to focus. But again, society drives this fear into their head. Well, the only way you can be successful is to have more money and more possession and we're going to addict you to possession. We're going to addict you to friggin' consumerism.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's a sad truth of where humanity is at this point.
Absolutely.
But yes,
but I don't think it's the people's fault, necessarily. That it is society's fault. This is the norm, and like it has been taken away from us that, everything is divine, and like we are part of this incredibly cool system, and like we live in these places now that you can't see the stars, and like there's no trees around, there's no living ecosystems thriving, and people go from their house to their car to their work, and like always walking in rubber sole shoes, and like there's literally no connection with the earth. And so it's not just their fault that they're not realizing this. It's like it's not taught to everybody, and like I think it's for a reason, because this society needs more workers that aren't distracted with all this cool stuff. It's like just get to work and watch Netflix when you get home and then work the next day, and it's like I think it's been taken away from us for a reason. And so like getting on the other side of it and realizing that we can do all of this amazing things, like it's empowering. It's like you're taking something back from the system. And
well, we owe all that to this devil named J.D. Rockefeller.
Yep.
All of it.
Absolutely. Public schooling.
Well, he
everything. And
everything across the fucking board, dude. Like that man literally is the fucking devil, and so is all of the people associated and related to them. They've created this money god that took over the planet, and only through corruption and ignorance, and then heavy-handedness that the general population lives under. Like we're blessed in America. We have so many freedoms compared to other countries. Although I've watched the degradation and the disassembling of those freedoms in my life, that's absolutely horrifying. And in many ways, I'm glad that you guys didn't see the freedoms we had, because you'd be rip shit at this point. I mean, I literally have to get up every day to remind myself how blessed I am and how lucky I was to grow up the way I did. I mean, we didn't have helmets, we didn't have seat belts. My mother shopped at the local friggin' farm stand, right? There was not a grocery store near us. They would buy a quarter of a cow a year and a part of a pig a year, and that was brought in all boxed. And my mother had a big freezer down in the basement, for with all of our meats. So yes, then we started to get introduced to Lucky Charms and some of this other toxic food.
Yeah.
But our parents didn't understand that it
Oh,
was
no, man.
toxic, right? So they were trying to do the best they could because we'd get advertised on our, shows cartoons that we'd watch, and we'd want that, and it was like, oh, well, I want to have some Lucky Charms or Captain Crunch. And so parents were just trying to do the best they could to help us. But
Yeah.
finally now it's gotten to the point where not in mainstream media, not in any type of advertising, that they're not going to come out and tell you, oh yeah, we can't even use half of these things in anything we sell anywhere in the world. You can only use it here, which is another horrifying fact. Again, owed all to J.D. Rockefeller and his monsters. So and I agree with you 100%, Chandler. Like we have been programmed. We are not allowed. They don't give us the time to critical think. They're forcing us on this gerbil wheel. Just keep going, keep going,
Right.
keep going. And when we do have a minute to stop, we're so tired or so distracted by electronics and other things that we can't ever catch that break. And
Literally.
this is where meditation is so valuable. Like, I don't know if you guys meditate, but pretty much I meditate every day I possibly can. And it's only for half an hour. I don't sleep. My mind is still active. If I close my eyes and I slow my breathing, but I don't care who walks in the room. I know who they are. I can tell, I can feel them. But that's because I meditated for so many years that you start to get that third eye open and you start to feel other energy sources, and whether they're good or bad, which is, used to be a problem with me because I didn't understand it. And then I met Pauline and she began to peel back the layers of the onion and explain to you, you're an empath. That's why when you walk into a room, if there's if there's negative energy, you're like, what's that all about? But you're also open to energy vampires because you don't understand what it is that you're feeling. So anyway, I really encourage people to meditate, and it could be you can meditate while you walk. It's really true. I mean, there are strict forms of meditation, but there are also very, very many, unrestricted forms of meditation. But it's being present. That's really the thing. It's just
That's
being
all it is,
present.
And so, like, when you're driving too, it's like, how often are we just distracted while we're driving? But like, you can practice just pranayama, just breath work while you're driving, and like start off and like, oh man, I can only breathe in for like 6 seconds. Like, that's not good. And then like you get going at it, and then you start inhaling for like 36 seconds. And it's like, whoa, it's like you gradually get longer and longer, and you expand your diaphragm, and breathing is so important, and that's something that we're not taught either. And so like most people aren't even like breathing right, and so we're on these shallow breaths, and like we're not in this relaxed rest and digest mindset. We're in fight or flight, and that's where a lot of us live our lives, drinking coffee all the time and hitting the vapes, and going from one place to another, and like there's no time to relax. And we talked about the downloads that we get when we look at the sunset or the sunrise, but like there's wisdom hidden everywhere, man. Like, you go out and you sit in the woods, and like you'll learn stuff from flipping over the leaves on the ground, and like it's incredible how much you can learn when you just take some time and slow down a bit
And be present.
and be present.
I actually told Ken's coming on.
Well, before we do the contest, I just wanted to agree with Chandler and Leighton about you can meditate anywhere. You can meditate while you're weeding your garden and add energy back into the system. But anyway, it's time to run the contest. So we'll just hit the draw and we'll see who we get. There you go.
Congratulations, brother. And yeah, please make sure you get Ken your email. And if you have any questions, you can always come back on another show and hit me up or hit us up on the show to let us know that you have some questions, and we'll make sure that we get you answered.
You bet. And yeah, it's all about the biology at gmail.com. So it's really easy, guys. It's the name of the channel at gmail.com. So don't forget to send me an email and we'll get you the link right away.
Fantastic. Alexa, do you have something you'd like to add too?
Sure. So yeah, I agree that, you don't have to think of meditation as the traditional, laying down, not thinking of anything or whatever. Yeah, you can do it. You can get into like that flow state if you're like doing something you love, like playing an instrument or doing art or any kind of physical movement, yoga. You can get into that flow state.
Honestly, like cleaning the house too. Sorry to interrupt. Like anytime that you're present and you're just like doing something with your hand, that could be a meditation for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I like to do is like just as a practice, just bring myself back to the present moment as often as I realize it, because it's so easy to just kind of get lost in your thoughts and thinking about the future, thinking about the past, and then we kind of forget about the present moment, and just coming back to what am I doing right now as often as you can throughout the day. And I think that's really helpful as well. As far as, and that can be just, coming back to your breath, as Chandler was saying. And I think breathing mechanics are, super important. And like Chandler said, we all kind of breathe. Well, I don't know. I do anyways. I was
call myself breathing shallow during
this
talk.
Shallow breather, and really we're supposed to like breathe like with our entire body. Like we have our diaphragm, and then we also have our pelvic floor, which are supposed to expand. Both of those diaphragms work together to expand when we breathe in and then contract when we breathe out. So thinking about that as well when we breathe, because I was like an opposite breather, you know what I mean? So I think it's called a paradoxical breather. And I know, that's kind of like common in our society because we're like, taught to suck in our stomachs, all the time. And we need to be thinking about both of those diaphragms expanding and contracting. So like, as far as like, just like movement and mechanics, like if we're not breathing right, none of our other movements are going to be right. So, that can, lead to like different pains in the body or back pain or, nerve pain or things like that. So it all starts with how you breathe.
And a lot of it's nasal breathing too. That's
yeah.
really important.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Through your nose.
Tongue up top of the roof of your mouth and just get the all through the nose, out the nose.
Yeah.
One thing, a lot of times it is kind of hard to expand your diaphragm. It gets tightened up, and so a helpful tip that I learned is like you breathe in, and then before you breathe out, you plug your nose and you keep your mouth closed, and you just like try to push it out without actually pushing anything out. Plug your nose, and then afterwards, your diaphragm should really be able to expand. So it's like.
Doesn't your ears pop?
Yeah, you don't want to do it quite that hard for your ears to pop. But now when I breathe in, my diaphragm totally expands all the way. So that's something that helped.
Great trick. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, you can retrain your breathing. It is possible because I did it. It took a while though, and it feels so weird at first when you like start, nasal breathing or tongue at the roof of your mouth or using a diaphragm in your pelvic floor. It feels really unnatural, and it took a while to really like program it. But you can, it just takes, again, coming back to that present moment as often as you can, and realizing, okay, I got a tongue at the roof of my mouth and all that. So
yeah, so
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chandler.
People that have like emphysema and lung problems can actually like and like that can't breathe too well without a tank, you know, once they learn how to deep breathe, and like there are part of the lungs that are still accessible, and it's just like knowing where to put that air, and like yeah, breath work and working with that can really help a lot of people out. Absolutely.
This is Cheeto.
You know,
Oh, Cheeto. Oh, hey, cutie.
Yeah, he's my little gangster. He had a really, really tough life. He and his brother Potato Chip were basically brand new, fresh born puppies thrown in a paper bag and dropped at a kill shelter in East LA. So had no relationship with their mother whatsoever. And then when he and his brother got to the point where they're going to get killed, this other group called the Lang Foundation swoops in and rescues them, as many as they possibly can. And so he and his brother went to Lang Foundation. His brother got adopted almost immediately. Cheeto got adopted a couple weeks later and then returned like within 3 days because of his behavior. He was a mess. I mean, I'll be honest, it took me months to train him, to house train him. And then, unfortunately, when he got returned, he ended up getting his leg caught through the cage and just freaked out and broke his leg in 3 places and was in a cast for 3 months. So, I mean, you talk about a rough start to life.
for real.
But when he and Poe met, they were best buddies literally that day and have been since. So, and he's finally letting me like rub his head now. And
Oh,
he's starting to play. He didn't even know. So, yeah, he brings a lot of joy to both Poe and I.
Awesome.
good.
Yeah. So one question for Alexa that I wanted to find out, and then let's talk ingredient. So Alexa, did you notice a difference in the cannabis expressions in a living bed versus a synthetic grow?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? Can you
It
talk
is
more on that?
incredible. So we started doing like breeding and pheno hunting, and just to keep pollen and everything separate at the grow, we do the breeding and pheno hunting at our home, and we started kind of having a hard time because the genetics that we were selecting, and we were growing in soil, it's just like different lights, different environment, things like that. The phenos that we were selecting from home, we would bring them to the beds, and they would smell different, look different a lot of the time. Sometimes it wasn't like huge differences, but sometimes it was huge differences, and we were like, wow, this was completely different when we grew it out in the basement. And when we do our pheno hunting, we pheno hunt from clone, so we'll grow out the seed and then clone it, and then grow out the clone, and that's when we select the pheno from the clone, because we found that from the seed it's really different from seed to clone as well. So and then so really any little environmental change can change dramatically the gene expression, which is like really, really incredible. So that's what I started to recommend to people is breed and select phenos in the system that you're growing for. That's always going to be your best bet, because if you're taking clones from someone who's saying like this grows really well in a synthetic system and you're bringing it into living soil, it's going to look and perform completely different. Like it won't even be the same plant sometimes. Like it's really outrageous how different the expressions can be from one environment to another. So yeah.
Thank you for that, because Dr. Ethan Russo has come out recently. He is an expert in the endocannabinoid system. And so he's formed a new company, did 5-6 years ago, where they're actually trying to encourage some of these minor cannabinoids that are way less studied, but have way more medicinal value than just the THC or the CBD does. And he's come out, very publicly about the fact that you can't grow medicine in synthetic environment. You can't do it. It needs to be connected to the life, to the biology, to the direct sunlight, the nature around it, that's how you get the full genetic potential from a plant.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy that so many people still, are focused on salts. I mean, look, even in a greenhouse, you can grow in living soil pots, or raised beds. It's just a matter of making a commitment to doing it.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. I've been screaming in the desert for years now of the importance of connecting the plant to the best of your abilities to all of the environmental impacts that it possibly can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now let's talk about some feedstock. So Chandler, you'll get a kick out of this. So Poe's still in training. He's in advanced training.
Mhm.
So not only is it really important is for his obedience to be perfect, but he's also been training to sniff out coal tar, which is a toxin. It's basically a catch-all for any hydrocarbon in the soil. So he goes out, and when he would put on his working clothes and get him focused on work, he'll go out and identify and find these samples of coal tar. We're going to be using as a demo dog for a environmental cleanup project, hopefully in the next couple of years. So,
Where do you find these deposits?
so I live here in Southern California.
Mhm.
If you actually Google Earth Oxnard, you can see all of the oil derricks up and down the coast from here all the way south to I think San Diego.
Okay.
Maybe not quite that far, but
Yeah.
California tar pits. This is like a huge oil reserve.
Okay.
And so when they drilled out here, and they wildcat, the top would blow up and they'd spew all of this oil in different forms all over the soil. And then when they went to actually start producing that well, they would bulldoze up these piles of oil and then bury them all up and down the shore.
Hmm.
So over time, the oil comes back to it's like birds of a feather flock together. Well, there's a lot of truth to that, especially in the mineral world. So in the mineral world, these will come back together through migrating in the soil, and they form these like very soft rocks. I mean, you can break some of them. You can break open, others you can't. There are definitely different differences. So when I first moved here, Poe brought me one, and I was like, "Oh, what the fuck is that?" And because of a past job, I was like, "Ooh, I bet that's coal tar." And I sent it off, and it verified, yes, it was a coal tar, a form of coal tar. And then I started looking at all the derricks. I started thinking about how they did it in the 1900s, and I was like, "Oh, damn!" Like I could find obvious landfills that were just huge piles of sand where they just kept dumping and then piling more, dumping and piling more. So it's all around me. So I was like, all right, I got to figure out what to do about this. And that's why I have um, Robin train Post. So he doesn't get the idea that if he brings me coal tar, I'll give him a treat. Like I need to discourage him from doing that while I'm encouraging to do that. So it's a very, fine line between, again, I don't want to discourage him, but I don't want him chewing on that shit either.
For sure.
So when he brings one, I take it and I put it somewhere, but I do not treat him. And I do not like pat him or thank him. I just basically ignore him, for lack of better words. But anyway, so Poe gets trained at Robin's house most often. Sometimes we go to parks, but she has like 2 beautiful maple trees, and we don't have maple trees out here in California. So they just started shedding leaves. So I'm like, oh my God, Robin, you can't get rid of that stuff. She's like, well, what do you mean? I go, can you just have your landscaper? Like, I know he's going to mow it and bag it. And so they'll get a combination of chips or green grass and mulch, leaf mold.
Perfect.
I'm like, this is a gold mine. So for the next month, probably, I'll be going to her house every Wednesday afternoon after he's done to take it and bring it to me up to Peach Hill. I'm very blessed at Peach Hill Soils. They are source separated for the most parts. So the ingredients that come in, I can cherry pick. They have a huge green waste pile, which every day I drive around it to see who's bringing what. And I'll often, harvest oak leaves or avocado leaves, or if I see a whole bunch of flowers, I'll harvest them. Again, diversity. So let's talk a little bit more about your compost manufacturing or facility, and how you're being, or how are you going about your methodology?
Yeah, so we are a food scrap collection service. So we offer that service, like I said, to about 900 people around Grand Rapids, including
Wow,
businesses. But yeah,
900 people.
yeah,
Damn.
about 850 residents or 870 residents or so, and about 30 businesses, um, and growing, expanded more and more. But yeah, we're very big on educating our customers, what we want in there, what we don't want in there, and they're all, doing this for the right reasons. They know that they shouldn't be sending their food scraps to the landfill. They want to make a difference, so they have tremendous effort that they put into it, and as a result, we get really, really clean food scraps that don't have hardly any contaminants in it. Um, Biggest contaminant is like the produce stickers. Not everybody takes those off every time, but I've never seen a Chiquita banana peel sticker get sifted out of the compost. That disappears. But some of the other ones, avocados from Mexico, they get sifted out sometimes. And I mean, everything gets sifted out before I sell it. But my point is, some of these produce stickers are decomposable. They're compostable, and some of them are not. And so it's just like, can't we get some legislation in here or something, and like not make
No,
it?
there is.
Yeah, I heard
Just,
that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's
just
amazing.
awesome. So yeah, we need to switch over to that and like put more of these responsibilities on like the big producers of this stuff instead of the end consumer. But yeah, people throw away a lot of food waste. I think it's like 40% of the food waste in the landfill comes from post consumers. And so it's like after they get it from the farm, after they get it from the grocery store, after it sits in their fridge, they didn't use that lettuce and then they throw it away. And like it's just so common. And again, this convenient culture and like how busy we are with our jobs and stuff, we get home and we don't want to cook all the time. I absolutely get that. And so food goes to waste, and yeah, instead of sending it to the landfill to pollute the air and the water and the soil and everything, you can compost it, turn it into humus, and then feed it back to the earth. And so that's what we're about at Wormies, and making that easy for people, because here in the city, not everybody has space or time to compost. And so if they can just pay a small subscription fee and have somebody compost their food scraps for them, and then they get some of that compost in return, then it's a win-win. So every 8 times that we pick up food scraps from their house, we drop off a bag. And so
Nice.
Alexa can attest to the biology in it, but like the small bag is very, very potent. And so we teach people how to make compost extracts, because let's face it, it's a lot easier than brewing a compost tea. And for somebody that isn't really into this stuff, making a compost extract is a lot easier. And so, yeah, teach them how to use it in one way or another, and just start spreading these microbes all over the city. And have people, if they don't have gardens or house plants, just feed it to their tree or their landscaping. But like getting that compost and these microbes back in the soil to remediate and regenerate is really, really important. So yeah, we take the food scraps and we bring them back to the farm, and I'll mix them with wood chips and leaves. And so we're experimenting with other things, but those are the main feedstocks that we have abundance of. And so we collect from commercial businesses, like I said, and we get like a ton of coffee grounds as well. Just like probably like 1,000 gallons of coffee grounds a week, it seems like.
Wow.
Yeah, lots of different inputs, and we've got a lot of biomass that we're experimenting with making. Just compost out of our own biomass at the farm. And so we just mowed like a big patch of like goldenrod and stinging nettle and yarrow, and added some comfrey from our garden, and really working with the sterile variety of comfrey a lot, the Bocking 14, and putting that around the compost piles and putting that around the property so we can chop it and feed it right to the worm rows, to the windrows that have worms in it, and just add that organic matter back on top of the piles. But yeah, we mix it with all those things, the wood chips, the leaves, the food scraps, and we let it go through a thermophilic stage where it does heat up, and we flip it every couple days, and we maintain that it stays over 131, and really try to cook off a lot of the seeds in there, but really the main thing is just to reduce this biomass, and so we don't just have all these volatile food scraps, bringing in all these flies and smelling really bad. So the key part of the hot composting is to reduce it all and to keep pests out of it. They don't want to be in a 140-degree pile that's cooking. So we cook it all, and then it takes about a month and a half for that stage, for the pile to be built and then everything to be turned and whatnot. And then for the next 11 months after that, it's sitting very connected with Mother Earth. And we take our old piles and we sift them, and everything that comes out the end, the overages, the chunkies, is just biochar and wood chips and worms and all the macroorganisms and the microorganisms, and all the good guys go back into the fresh pile. And so that's like our mother culture that we sift out every time. And I know I didn't include it in the feedstock, but yeah, we add biochar in before the thermophilic stage as a carbon filter to help filter out any of the smells that are off-gassing from that pile. And in doing so, it keeps more of the nutrients in the pile instead of off-gassing. But then it is a home for these microbes for the next 11 months as they live in this compost pile, and as the worms and the mushrooms, the fungi spread out and work through everything. So yeah, we go through that pre-digestion stage, and then we feed it in these shallow windrows that we inoculate with the worms, and we add spent mushroom blocks so the mycelium spreads everywhere, and we let that break down for 11 months, like I said, and then really like to get some cover crops on there. So we have the roots in there. And so it's not, after 10 months or so of sitting in the windrows and everything's broken down, you can't recognize anything. It all just looks like, nice fertile humus. We introduce the cover crops, and then we get that plant association back in there. And so now it's not just decomposing microbes, it's plant growth microbes. And I think it just primes that compost for going back to the garden and gets, stimulation. It's a biostimulant, having all these plants put those exudates down in there and feeding these microbes that are already in there. Also working with throughout that process, we spray compost teas, and working with an algae company that's really cool, and it's another person that would be great on the compost, Camille, from End Soil Algae. But seeing some great results, just adding all these microbes to it, and especially with this algae, which is acting as like a school bus for all these other microbes that literally get inside of this algae, and then it's a delivery system for them to get into the plant. And so combining the algae with the biochar gives it like a forever home. And so it's like an actual inoculant where you apply it one time, and like they're gonna stay there if you got like the right environment for them. So it's like so much cool shit and so much testing, and like getting into like trial piles where we're testing, algae in one pile, no algae in this pile, and getting more and more into the testing, and really excited for what we're gonna do next year with all that. I'm just rambling on, but on our concrete thermophilic pad that we flip all the hot piles on, there's a collection basin on the downhill portion of that. And so any leachate that's coming out is being collected. And so we have a pool full of nutrient dense water that will be intentionally growing like some aquatic biomass on it to help take up the excess nitrogen and phosphorus, and then put that back into a pile of wood chips and biochar, and like it's like making sure that we're not, putting excess nutrients down into the groundwater or anything like that. We're using every part of this, and it's really cool.
Awesome, dude. Yeah, I just did a post about I finally got myself 5 worm bins, and I'm starting to play with bedding and foods and all that. So the first thing I did was I plowed out, or I took my skid steer, leveled out not leveled, but pitched out a little spot, and then I put a bucket at the end of it, and then I put plastic tarp down. So every time I water the worms, I end up getting, because I'm in bins, not in the ground.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm in these bins so I can move them around and play with the feeding. And anyway, so I collect that leachate, and then I put it right back into my pile as well. So that's kudos to you, dude. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It works so great.
It really does. Yeah,
and the biochar, like I was dying to see if you had been adding that, because that is like one of the greatest kept secrets that you talked about, is the value of that, especially in vermicomposting. Not that it's bad, not that you can't do it in regular thermophilic compost, but vermicomposting, it's just amazing what happens when you introduce that. Dude, you've taken it really to a whole nother level over there, and no wonder your shit works so good.
Yeah. So it's nice, and that's why we call it, vermicompost instead of worm castings. It's like there is chunks of carbon in there as well as the castings, and there's tiny pieces of micronized biochar. And so it's like it's so much better than just worm castings that were just fed newspaper, like from like the big guys. It's like, yeah, I'm really proud of the product for sure. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually rolling out a product myself soon. I was actually supposed to roll it out a while ago, but where I'm taking compost, screening it, worm castings, and screening it. And both of those have gotten fish brew. So it's basically my product, but on a scale that's a lot bigger, which keeps the cost down because all that manufacturing took me, it's a lot of work to
Absolutely, man.
create small batches and then press them and then resend them. Whereas now I can just screen on scale and it's not it's not as much work. It's still a lot of work. Let's face it. I mean, it's like you said, 6 months minimum, more like 8 months to make a pile. And that's daily watering, daily temperature readings, just making sure everything is cruising along. So yeah, kudos to you, dude. Kudos to you. And I'm dying to ask Alexa, is he still crazy fungally dominant like he was?
Yes. Yeah. So I make a lot of compost teas, and I can only brew the super fungal dominant compost tea with Wormies compost. It's really amazing. Well, you can also do it with like leaf mold too, but as far as like compost goes, like of all the compost that I've tested, I can only do it with Wormies. So it's really amazing how much fungi is in there, especially for like a worm compost, but it's really just like adding, like he adds those leaves and woody sources, and you add a lot of mushroom blocks too.
Right. Absolutely.
And yeah, so I've kind of like modeled my worm bin after the the Wormies style of making compost. So now like with my worm bin, I add like a lot of like woody sources and like biochar and things like that, and trying to mimic that to get like a fungal dominant mother culture that I can use for making compost teas and fungal dominant compost teas as well. So
awesome.
Nice. So one of the most recent tricks I've found for getting worms to go crazy, you know avocado tech, right?
Oh yeah.
All right. So try peaches.
Okay.
Unbelievable. First, you'll get a fungus gnat. Like
sure.
You get a little bit of white. It's not fungus. It's yeast. Yeah. You'll get a yeast plume. And then if you just peel back that and you look underneath it, it's a worm orgy. It's crazy. It's even better than avocado tech.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And
so
I get up for watermelons here too, for sure.
Oh yeah, that's another one, right? I threw a slice of watermelon in just to see. The peaches worked way better, so I backed off. But there's this fruit place that sells down near Agaman, and they have tons of wasteful fruit, and they typically just send it to Agaman, dump it. So I've been stopping by there, getting buckets of these different. I got the avocados there, I got the peaches there, I got the little bit of watermelon from them. When I was playing around because I'm doing different style beddings as well as different feed rates, and just trying to learn, right? And so anyway, yeah, that was my latest greatest trick. Was peaches are friggin' amazing.
I love it. Have you seen any germinate yet? Any of the bits?
No, well, it's only been happening in the last month or so.
Sure.
A little less, actually, probably only a couple of weeks.
Dude, I know by putting the avocados in there, it's like probably 10 out of 10. I mean, 9 out of 10 at least germination rate for these avocados. Like, it's so easy. People you see online will stick like toothpicks in them and hold them in a cup of water and like try all these ridiculous methods, and it works like 3 out of 10 times. But if you just forget about it in a worm bin, you're gonna end up with an avocado tree. So, I don't know if you're familiar with pawpaws, but they grow east of the Mississippi, and and they grow all the way up in Michigan. And I just got a
Yep.
ton of them. They're huge native fruit, kind of looks like a mango, tastes like a mango and banana and custard. And they're delicious. But I grabbed a bunch of them, and I'm going to use them to plant around the farm. And so I gave some to the mammals out there, and they'll eat them and spread them around. But tossing a ton just in the worm bins, because I know that, you know, the avocado pits germinate so well, and it's actually in the avocado family. But worms will eat all the fruit, and then they'll stay in this worm bin that will get cold in the hoop house. You know, it'll stay warmer than outside, but it'll still get cold enough for the seeds to stratify. And then in the spring, hopefully, I'll have, you know, just a bed full of these pawpaw seedlings that, you know, any plant that pops up in the worm bin is going to be thriving. So yeah, I'm excited for that little experiment. Start like a little tree nursery right in my worm bin. I got like bathtub sized bin that I'm doing it in.
Nice. Well, unfortunately, you answered our only question because they had asked if you were growing pawpaws. Yeah, because they're really starting to become popular.
Oh, they really are. Yeah, I've planted I think we got like 8 trees now, but they're all like knee high, so it's gonna be a couple of years. But I think just by throwing the fruit around and letting the mammals spread them around, like we got a good chance that they'll get started.
Yeah,
And start off really well with like some of the filtered sunlight. You know, they don't like direct sunlight as like a small sapling, so planting them around with like some river locust in front of them, and so the river locust will grow up and kind of give that partial shade for the pawpaw, and then I just chop it back and mulch it up and mulch that river locust. And you know, once the pawpaw behind it is tall enough, then I won't need it anymore. So yeah, utilizing some silvopasture and permaculture techniques around the farm, and it's a lot of fun. Just growing maximum diversity, even if they're not all gonna, you know, finish up. Even if some of them are just for biomass, you know, that's the part of it.
that is awesome. So
Yeah.
it's just literally you going next level. You know, forest food bank and friggin'
Yeah.
worms and composting. I love it, dude. I fucking love it. Can't believe I knew you back then. Now you're a famous guy.
I'm excited for you to come back and see what we've done, and you know, it's gonna be
really-
growing exponentially. So
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, it was beautiful. It was raw, and I could see the potential. And I've been hooting and howling behind the scenes for you. And when I heard you got jammed up, I was like, "Oh fuck!" I was hoping that you just powered your way through it. You did. So congratulations. That
thanks
is
so much.
a well earned victory for
I
sure.
appreciate it, man. Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Luis as well. Luis is the owner of Wormies, and none of this would be possible to him. So, no, there's some confusion out there on the line, on the online space, especially in the cannabis space. You know, I'm the one that is the face at all these cannabis events, but just a huge shout out to Luis. So,
All right, Luis.
yeah.
So normally we would have taken questions by now, but since you've already answered the questions, is there anything that you guys want to ask of me? I mean, it's been honored to have you guys on here. I'm so excited for you, Alexa, and your latest work, and Chandler for you and getting, you know, Wormies to where it is today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. I guess for you, Leighton, like I think a lot of people are interested in learning more about the, particulate organic matter, mineral associated organic matter, dissolved organic matter, and kind of just, breaking that down into layman's, because, the study you sent me is so technical. It's amazing if you pick it apart, like, oh my gosh, like I would love to have an episode maybe one day with you where we can like pick it apart, or like you did with Maggie and
and oh god, Andy, Maggie and Andy.
Yes, they are just brilliant. Oh my gosh, wow, that episode was amazing. I think I listened to it like 5 times to just like again pick apart all that information in there and digest it. It was really, really amazing. So I think, if you could just kind of go through your understanding of it and maybe just go through like simple definitions for like layman's how it works, and then maybe like a practical application of how, people can use that in their gardens. And yeah, I think it's so cool that we have like definitions for different types of organic matter now, because now we can actually describe like why certain composts are better than other composts. And yeah, so and just like how soils, work in so yeah, I'll let you.
Yeah. So, that's been a deep dive since
Mhm.
then. There was a paper in uh, 21, and there was another paper in 23, which is, I think I sent you both. I don't remember,
Mhm.
but that was the first time people had broken out and gone down the rabbit hole of better explaining the form of compost. Remember, compost isn't a product; it's actually a process.
Mhm.
Although I still call it compost, because if you don't, people will be like, all right, what are you talking about? So
Right.
until this is common knowledge or common terms, I'll continue to call it compost. I'll just remind people that compost is a process. So in the very beginning, you start with GOM, typically ground organic matter. It can be many different types. It could be leaves, it could be grass clippings, it can be whole trees, it can be chips, it can be trimmings from a hedgerow. Doesn't matter. It's still ground organic matter. At least it starts that way. And then typically it goes through a thermophilic phase where it heats up, and now it's starting to break down. And the first iteration is what we would call POM, particulate organic matter. Now, POM will only last for a matter of a few months. Typically, in drier areas and less humid areas, it'll last a little bit longer. But it's something that the bugs, the microbes consume very, very quickly. So it's not good for like ground cover. It's not like a chips. It's not like a shredded wood. Those are going to last a lot longer on the surface, but that's GOM. That's ground up organic matter. That hasn't gone through any kind of digestive phase. So once it gets through that thermophilic phase, and it actually becomes a more of a small particulate or particulate organic matter, then it's fast acting. So that's something that typically you want to use, like in a vegetable garden, or if you're gonna use it around a tree, you want to scrape back the excess soil and put that down underneath, and then protect it with more soil, or protect it with chips over the top of it, so you really get the benefit, because it'll oxidize. That's typically the problem out here when they spread the palm in the field. Excuse me, if they don't turn it in, it oxidizes and blows away, so they get zero benefit. A recent study, this was a good one. I don't think I've talked to you about. They did a 5-year trial. They tried uh, GOM, POM, and they did it in different test plots. So they both tilled it and they left it on the surface. And then one experiment, they also used both of them. So they put the POM down first and the GOM over it, and tilled it and didn't till it. And then some of them they planted and others they didn't, with a cover crop. So lo and behold, the one that created the highest amount of organic matter, or OM, in the soil, was actually only the plants and not tilled, which makes no sense to me. But it doesn't make common sense to me. But what I continued to read the white paper down the rabbit hole, was the realization that when they till it, they're oxidizing the soil. So they're opening it up and letting the oxygen down in, and therefore, even though they buried it, technically, it's still oxidized way faster than if they layered it, uh, palm and then GOM on top and then cover cropped it. That was by far the way to most organic matter back into soil. So again, we that's a huge advance in understanding and learning, about how we're going to have to rectify some of these farms. Now, I don't know if you guys fly much, but if you fly over the country, you can see all kinds of dead pivots. And what I mean by a dead pivot is a giant circle of just brown, and they're not growing crops there anymore because the soil's so decimated that they can't grow anything in it. So they just abandon the pivot and they abandon the land and they go find somewhere else to farm. And so sooner or later, someone's going to have to start, repairing that. I mean, again, as we degrade the soils, we're going to have to start building them back. Someone's going to have to do it sooner or later because we can't just keep degrading, right? We're gonna
down some more trees and grow there.
Right. Anyway, let's not get. I could get real angry real quick when we start going down that route. But bottom line is, that's going to be a really, really valuable study for the owners of those abandoned pivots, because they still have pivots, they still have water, but they can't grow anything in it. So this is a great way to start it, to just jumpstart the system, because especially if you put a compost extract on the palm before you covered it up with the gum, and then seeded it, that little bit of dissolved organic matter will store in the palm and give just enough nutrient and just enough biology that you can now start to grow cover crops, in probably some of these, super hardy ones that don't need a lot of nutrition, don't need a lot of support. But that's the beginning, right? That's the foundation of rebuilding these soils that we've destroyed. So continuing on, so now we go from palm to mineral associated organic matter, right? So that's MOAM. And what mineral associated organic matter basically is the foundation of aggregates and foundation of the long-term organic nutrient pool or organic carbon pool. See, they're the same fucking thing, right? They're identical, although we tend to call soil organic matter and not soil organic carbon because of soil science. But eventually those two will become interchangeable as well. And this is unlocking more and more about how can we really carbon harvest. Like this crazy badass shit about pumping CO2 down into the ground. It's coming back out, people. It's just a money grab. It's a fucking scam. It's gonna come back out. There's no way you can trap it in the earth. I don't care if you drill it into a fucking mountainside. There are cracks and fissures in that mountain. So it's coming back out. So this is a true way to manage and understand how to store carbon. And that's both in the biology, because let's face it, the biology stores a ton of carbon. And then the roots are the way to build the organic matter, which again, storing a ton of carbon. And all the while creating healthy soils that, guess what? Cleans the water. Yeah, if we do this right, we'll be able to drink from the streams and rivers again in 1,000 years. Let's hope. Hopefully not 1,000. You know where I'm going. So then we have the most stable form, long-term pool, bank, whatever you want to call it, of carbon that supports biological life, both bacteria as well as plant roots. Now, somewhere in the middle between palm and mineral-associated MOAM, we have biological compost, right? Because palm, if you've looked at palm, there's usually very little biology in it. It just came out of the thermophilic process. Hasn't had 6 months to recover yet. Mm-hmm. So if you allow palm to sit there for a period of time, cure, as I say,
Yep.
No one's here. Come here. Sorry about that. There's going to be a point somewhere between those two to get a lot of biology. And what I've noticed too is that in the compost that I make, I do that after about a year in mowing, and I don't have a tremendous amount of biology. Like I'm typically want to see 5, 6, 10 protozoa per view, right? And I want to see fungal hyphae everywhere. And typically when it gets to that point, now everything is cyst and spore. So what I tell people is that when you're using this product, the best way to use it is to dissolve it. Because when you dissolve it, when you add it to water, that water stimulates the microbial activity. The bacteria start getting crazy. They start dividing. And all of a sudden, the protozoa come out of cyst. They start dividing and producing more and more and more. And so that's a way to take that MOAM and turn it into a more user friendly because let's face it, it goes right down into the soil,
Right.
but it's also a better inoculant because I can sell you the perfect bio-intensive or bio-complete compost, but you're going to get way more value if I let it go all the way to moam, and that way you're getting more organisms because as it gets older and older, those organisms just cyst up left and right. So I'm just creating this spore bank, this
Hmm.
pool of the the nutrient cyclers, which is what we need in our soil. That's the one missing link is the fungi and the protozoa. So that's just like a brief way to lay out the process or the evolution or succession from GOM to moam. But it also shows you the power of it. Like I've sent moam to people who have a microscope and they're like, "Hey, this is shit." I'm like, "Dude, mix it with water and call me tomorrow."
Bring it back to life.
Seriously, mix it with water, give it a couple of stirs, microscope it 24 hours later. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I doubted you. But that's a real issue is that again, education, right? What's this? Would you consider IMO3 composting? Well, no. IMO3 is the expansion of your organisms, of specifically your yeasts. That's another thing that's very well misunderstood in the overall natural farming or Korean natural farming space is that your IMO collection is a purely yeast, but that yeast is the foundation, is the succession necessary to get the saprophytic.
Right.
You're never going to get the saprophytic if you don't have a lot of yeast in the soil. So by adding that to grains, you're heating up, but what you're trying to do is get everything to sporulate and spread and grow and multiply in a spore form, not in a living form. And that's why it's so critical that you don't get it wet, right? If you get that shit wet, man, it blows up and now you've lost the whole pile. So there's an intricacy that is happening in IMO, but I wouldn't call it composting. I would call it spore production. It's parallel. It's definitely parallel to composting. Maybe there is a way to niche it into something between because the grains are being added, you're adding the food source. But again, I wouldn't normally just relate that directly to a composting process, although it is very parallel. So hopefully I answered your question, whoever that was. I didn't even get to see who they were. But anyway, that's a brief explanation.
How dry is the moam?
It's moist. It holds together like a brownie, so you can squeeze it. And
It'll cyst up even when it's moist.
Say again.
Those microbes will like cyst up even when it's moist. Isn't
yeah, you know why? It's because of the density. So the particles get smaller and smaller. There's less oxygen available.
Not enough oxygen for them.
Yeah, so they cyst up.
Interesting.
Yeah, again, it's the physical part, right?
Right. So if you did get it too wet, it could probably easily go anaerobic in that environment.
Hell yeah! Like I struggled in my first years out of Rodale, or my first day or months in Rodale with exactly that fact was that I made this stuff. I made what was called biocakes, and I think they're still up on my website because that's getting modified finally after 15 years.
I know how it goes, man.
Well, embarrassing, but yeah, who's got time for that shit? But anyway, the biocakes, I would run the process through my washing machine, and I would vibrate it and separate out as much liquid as I can through the dewatering process, and then I would put it in I think they were wine presses that I started with. And so I would press them and just squeeze all the last bit of moisture out of it. And I'd be like, okay, perfect. And I'd set it on the shelf because it felt great. It felt like like a cookie, not a moist cookie, but not a dry cookie either. Just a cookie. But what I realized after a period of time is even though I got all the moisture out of it, the moisture would still migrate to the center. So you'd snap it open one day and it would be completely homogeneous. But after you let it sit for a week, you open up in the middle would have this pocket of like a jelly donut that had gone anaerobic. And so I was like, oh, fuck, I can't ship this. So then I started playing with taking those and screening them. So dry sieving them.
Right. Making hash.
Making hash. Well, that was my nickname when I first started. They called me the compost hash maker.
That's awesome.
And I laughed. I was like, yeah, whatever. You know, I was insulted. I don't care. Call me whatever the fuck you want. But in reality, that's what I was doing.
For real, man. That's awesome.
For real. I was making compost hash.
Right.
And so then by dry sieving it up and fluffing it up, I could then put it in a 5-gallon compound bucket, sealed. And I could go back 6 months, a year, and it was actually just getting better and better.
Wow.
There's more and more concentration because there was enough oxygen in the beginning for those organisms to, again, start dividing and reproducing. But then as time went by, they would cyst as the oxygen went down.
Mm-hmm.
And all I had to do was just crack the bucket a little bit, you know, just like one of the little flaps you kind of half snap on a 5-gallon bucket. And that was enough for the gas exchange that it never went anaerobic. And dude, you know, I had popped a bucket 5-6 years after I made it, and it was better than the day I made it.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the key to the whole thing, is understanding the physical attributes of your compost so that you're not causing loss because you didn't understand that, you know, that fact of slowly reducing the oxygen to put everybody to sleep. Mm-hmm. And once they're asleep, they're in good shape, unless you let it oxidize. That's another really important thing, is I tell people, yeah, crack it, but don't leave the lid off of it, because you're going to lose that top layer due to oxidation. And once they're oxidized, they're done. They're gone. You're not going to get them back. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we hit over 2. So thank you guys so much. I was so glad to see you guys. It's been too long. Thank you for coming on and sharing, and, you know, let's stay in touch, and maybe a few 6 months, whatever, get you guys back on again and hear how things are going. I know you're going into the winter. Doesn't affect you as much, Alexa, but I know you're going to, Chandler, probably have a little more time on your hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe do a little more research or play with more projects, whatever.
Both.
But I really appreciate you. And Ken, as always, thank you so much for all the behind the scenes work and making this both entertaining and educating.
Thank you both so much, and definitely gave me some things to think about there.
And don't forget to send Leighton the contact information for those people that you mentioned, because that's information we all need to have.
Yep.
Yeah, send me all of your speakers list, all your speakers.
They all deserve a spotlight.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, intimate, and talking in front of a crowd is a little bit different than just, you know, talking to you guys.
Right, and just hanging out and chatting. Like, this isn't intense. We're there's no, you know, mission here. We're just having a conversation.
Absolutely.
And that to me is the fun part.
Yep. Okay, guys, for the channel, we have Andy and I on Friday. Why your plants have white flies and how to deal with it organically. And I am trying to set up a show on Friday, but you'll just have to stay tuned. If you're not following me on Instagram, you can check that out. Links are in the description. Winners, don't forget to email me if you want your prizes. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you guys.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. Love you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.